Welcome to the TDS Early Years podcast. Now, each week we're going to be joined by different educational experts from across the globe who are going to offer exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help us as practitioners unlock all the potential for learning that there is in the early years. So to be first to hear about future episodes and to access all of the follow-up content, including ideas for your own setting, Pinterest, mood boards, and loads more, you can sign up for exclusive access using the link in our podcast description. Hello everybody, my name is Alistair Clegg and I am your host for this week's TDS Talking Early Years podcast, and I'm an early years consultant, trainer and author. The first series of the TDS Talking Early Years podcast aims to explore the amazing adventures that children can have in outdoor learning in the early years. And I'll be talking to a number of global experts that we aim to use their knowledge to inspire your everyday work and unlock the potential of all of the great things that you do in your early years settings. During today's episode, we're going to be introducing the concept of risky play in the early years, which I know is a big one for lots of us. And we're going to be trying to unpick what it is, how we can recognize it, and how we can use it to its full potential. And to join me to delve into that subject, I am delighted to introduce Ellen Sandseter, who is today's guest. Hello, Ellen.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for being here. I am actually a huge fan of your work, so I am a little bit fanboying at the moment. It's going to be a pleasure to spend the next few minutes discussing your work around risky play. But for anybody that hasn't come across your work, could you just tell us a little bit about you, who you are and what you do?
Well, I am a professor within early childhood education in Norway, Trondheim in Norway, working at the Department of Physical Education and Health here. So I'm actually becoming preschool teachers or early childhood teachers. And my main, interest within research is risky play and children's risk-taking in play. So I have been trying to, see the positive side of children taking risks and not to, overprotect them.
Well, taking risks is a huge part of what children do in terms of their typical development. Yeah. But as adults, in an effort to keep children safe, which I think is what a lot of early childhood educators feel that our job is, I think we can sometimes stifle that. So in today's episode, we're going to kind of introduce the concept of what is risky play and also define it a little bit in terms of how we can recognize it and then begin to look at some of the benefits. Yeah. Because if I take you back to when I first started to teach, which was a good 32 years ago, we were very risk averse. So everything was crash mats, everything was low level, everything was very controlled, and anything that would cause any kind of risk was really taken away. So in terms of outdoor physical play, but also around things like, I remember when I first had a classroom, we had a woodworking bench where the children could choose to go and get hammers and nails and saws. And at one point they were all taken away due to that element of risk. So could you just give us a little overview about your research and what is risky play and why is it important?
Well, first of all, I want to say that risk is a really broad concept. And in my research, I've been focusing on physical risk. There's several reasons for that. One is that I come from physical education and sports science myself. So I've always been interested in the physical active play of children, and also, of course, a lot about outdoor play. We have the Norwegian and Scandinavian friluftsliv notion, where we go out and roam around in nature areas. And also because, at least as you mentioned also, many of the things that we do to protect children are physical. So we don't want them to fall down from a tree and break their arm or their leg. So we are, doing something physical also with the environment to avoid for that to happen. So I've been focusing on the physical parts of risk, while I acknowledge that you also have, social risk and more, other kinds of risks that children also seek. So, but when I have been working on this, I've been focusing on physical active play that involves, thrilling, exciting experiences and predictability in the play. children don't know the outcome of the play. They're trying new things. So it's a lot of kind of a subjective experience for the children, intense subjective experiences, but it also comes with a more objective side of it. So of course, if a child explores climbing high up in a tree, you also have the objective risk of children falling down and getting injured, or, you know, in the worst case scenario, dying from it. So that's kind of the definition. So it's both a kind of a subjective risk experience part of it, but it's also always the more objective part.
Because in an effort to take a physical risk, to climb a bit higher in the tree, to go along the thinner ledge, to jump across whatever you might be jumping across that might be wider than you expect, obviously there is the child's ability to risk assess, and that physical movement, but also entwined with that is that emotional risk take and that kind of knot that you get in your stomach where your body is telling you this is unfamiliar. And I think lots of adults have a concern that young children don't have an ability to risk assess. So because you've never experienced this before, you're not going to be aware of the fact that if you go a little bit too far, you're going to fall off and hurt yourself. But in your experience, is it inbuilt in our basic human nature that we have an ability to risk assess, or do we always have to have tried and failed to be able to accurately assess a risk?
Well, no. In normal developing children, they are approaching risk step by step and learning how to handle it. So you usually see that they are, at least if they get to try from an early age, they will usually not stretch the limit too much. So they would, stop, or they would withdraw from the play if they feel that the risk is too high for them to manage. And that is individual between children. So one 3-year-old child could stop at one point, and another one would feel secure and competent enough to go further. Recently I published a paper together with 2 colleagues about toddlers and how they are exploring a wild nature area, and they're constantly risk assessing and risk managing, and no injuries happens. And they are like really, really small toddlers. So even at that young age, they're really aware of the environment, and also they find solutions to manage the risks.
I think you're right. It's a natural state of being as children are developing and getting a sense of who they are and their bodies and their physicality and their proprioception. We are kind of inbuilt to physically explore the space. You can only really learn to control your body and your movements once you've got a real awareness of what your body can do. And also as a parent, never mind a practitioner, I've got 3 boys who are now, in their 20s, young men. But my eldest son was just kamikaze in his exploration of the world. So he was always climbing, always jumping. I remember once we went to a castle and we lost him. He was about 4, and he'd shimmied out onto a cannon and actually gone out over it and was hanging off and like, well, hey, look, here I am. And literally his entire family having a heart attack. And he was like, this is great. Whereas my middle son was completely the opposite and was less keen to kind of explore that risk. And again, I think what we sometimes do as adults as well is stifle that exploration, because we get, be careful Tourette's, that every time a child is doing something that's remotely risk-taking, we're saying, be careful, be careful. And that then slowly drips the message that actually, it makes me reluctant to take a risk because my adult is telling me not to do that.
Yeah. And children are as different as adults are. So adults also are really, really different in terms of risk-seeking personality. So some people want to climb to the top of the mountain and base jump from the top of the mountain, while other people get the same thrill when they're sitting in their sofa watching that on a television.
Yes.
So and children are the same. So we need to acknowledge that also children have different kinds of needs. And that's also why I'm kind of opposing the age-appropriate concept, because I don't believe one 4-year-old is the same as another 4-year-old. Small children also have individual needs, individual competencies and also different levels of, acceptable risks.
Absolutely. I think we are always trying to meet the child where they are, as opposed to assume that because you are at this age or in this particular class or this particular group. It's like, when babies walk, some might walk at 9 months, some might walk at 16 months, but most adults end up walking eventually. So I think what we're saying to practitioners then is that when you're creating a space that's going to have opportunities for children to take physical risk, that doesn't mean to say that you're asking 4-year-olds to abseil off the roof or you're getting them to jump cavernous depths, because for different children, risk is very different.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's about creating spaces that are open-ended and ambiguous enough to allow you and children to create the risks that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and that's why I usually talk about affordances and, what the environment affords us to do. And children are really functional in their way of interpreting their environment. And if you have a diverse environment with a lot of affordances, a lot of opportunities and kind of invitations for activities, most children will find a way to seek risks at their own level. So that, in my opinion, that's the best play environment.
Absolutely. I think it's also, as practitioners, looking out for how children are utilizing that space. Like I read something that you'd written about the children who will use impact as a means of risk and thrill, I suppose. So whereas a practitioner, you might get frustrated that a child's on a scooter and just driving the scooter into the fence or the wall repeatedly, it's not about a destructive behavior. It's often about a risk-taking behavior or just that experimenting with what happens when. So I think for us, it's about also trying to always reinterpret what we see children do in the spaces we create. And, acknowledging that's often linked to development and trying to enhance that as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking then about trying to create spaces that have got opportunities for children to do lots of different things in. So I suppose in terms of resourcing, if I'm just thinking if people are listening to this now thinking, well, what can I have, particularly in my outdoor space, that allows children to take those risks? It's about having lots of things that can be multi-purposed.
Yep. And flexible. And also I would say, well, nature is my favorite play environment because it has affordances for everyone, even if you're small, if you're big, if you're, tall, if you're, or if you're heavy or light or whatever age. If you have a, very strong courage and you seek a lot of risks, you will find something. And also the more, conscious ones would also find opportunities for activities. So I would say a good kind of guide is to try for the play environment to resemble nature as much as possible if you don't have the opportunity to take the children out in nature, like real nature.
Yeah.
So think about diversity and flexibility. Does it look the same every day, or is it possible to, change the environment? Can children change the environment to explore or experiment with the environment? And also, if you buy like climbing frames from the producer, you will get the same, same amount of centimeters between each floor. That's not really challenging or, thrilling or anything. Could it be more, not so standardized? So I would look for things, environments resembling nature.
I think, and then there was elements of that kind of recycled outdoor space where you can get crates and pallets and logs that children can move and stack. And obviously you need to risk assess those as an adult to make sure that it's a safe space, but a safe space can also have risk. So a space that has high level risk, a space doesn't mean that it's an unsafe space.
No. And that's really important because I'm not saying you're going to create dangerous play environments. You're going to create environments where children can, with intent, take risks. So they do a risk assessment and they do a risk decision to take a risk. And when they do that, they're really concentrated and aware of the risk that they are taking. So it's not about making dangerous, hazardous environments where bad things can happen. It's about making possibilities for children to, find their own ways of, risk decisions and exploring the thrills and excitement in a way. So
I think you're dead right, because taking a risk can be very fulfilling and can be very engaging, because it's where exciting stuff is happening and your body will be releasing all sorts of chemicals related to kind of risk and reward. And I know we're talking predominantly about outdoor spaces, but also it often strikes me in the settings that I work with that in their indoor spaces there is so little opportunity for children to take any kind of risk, especially physical, that often children who require that risk and reward, and obviously ones that are exploring the development of their physical body, sometimes struggle in that indoor space, which sometimes results then in what adults would perceive to be inappropriate behaviors. But actually, it's children creating opportunities to explore their own risk.
Yeah. And I also think that that practitioners and teachers should also work for, having indoor environments that affords risk taking. It wouldn't be the same as in the outdoors, but in one of my recent studies, we found that, overall with both the indoor and outdoor environments, at least in Norwegian preschools, there's about 10% risky play when you look at the time when children can choose their own kind of play. And that's quite a high percentage, actually. It's similar to symbolic play, for instance. And we found 13% of risky play in the outdoors and as much as 10% in the indoors. And that was because the preschools in our study actually had spaces for that. So it would be larger spaces. It would be, more large construction materials so that they could build their own, towers and climb up on them and then jump down from them. So it would be spaces indoors that actually promoted also risk-taking. So it is possible. You just have to be aware that, or at least analyze your indoor space and see, is this a space only for sitting by a table and, do like fine motor skill activities, or is it really a space also to use the whole body?
And I think it's about adults, again, just revisiting, like we're doing today, the concept of what is risk and really digging down into that. Yeah. Still in some early childhood settings I work in, especially in the block play area, which does allow opportunities if it's a big space for some risk taking. I was in one very recently that had a little notice that said no tower can be taller than shoulder height, which means that obviously if you're only 4 and you're building a tower that's as tall as your shoulder, it's not a very tall tower. So an adult had put that there to try and keep children safe, but actually what it probably did was to stifle not just their creativity, but all their risk-taking.
We actually had that in one of our preschools in our study. And what happened was that the children, when adults didn't watch, the children built higher. And they told us researchers that don't tell the staff, because they sometimes it's almost like if you ban it, it's even more interesting.
That's basically the nature, isn't it? If somebody tells you can't do it, you just want to do that all the more.
Reverse psychology. So yeah.
But I think you're right. Those more ambiguous spaces with multi-purpose resources that can be used in many different ways, so it allows children to interpret, with kind of adults who have got a belief in the importance of risk, calculated, risk within a space, and the fact that children will risk assess, not in the same way that we are trained to often as practitioners, where it might involve bits of paper and you're risk assessing in advance. Children tend to do lots of dynamic risk assessment where they will, as we do in the moment, think, can I jump that space or can I not? Or can I climb this high or can I not? And that's a really important aspect of their everyday play.
Yeah, and you mentioned that they're getting known to what they are able to do, what they are able to do with their bodies, but also exploring the environment in such a way also gives them a very, very good knowledge of the environment that they are moving around in or living in. So they get to know what's dangerous and what is not dangerous, and what they can do within the environment with their bodies and with their own courage or personality and what they seek.
And all of that is really fascinating. And we're going to stop there, because in the next episode, we are going to really try and explore in a bit more depth the benefits of risky play, and not just the benefits for children, but also the benefits for practitioners, because risky play can be as big a risk as it is for the practitioners as for the child. Yeah. But for now, Ellen, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All it leaves me to do is to say a huge thank you to our guest, Ellen, for joining us and providing such valuable and interesting insights. So you've been listening to the TDS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Clegg, and Ellen Sandseter. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, and I'm sure you have, don't forget that you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access all of the exclusive follow-up content, which includes ideas for your setting and Pinterest boards that will help you to shop resources that are really good for learning through risk.